Perfect. Sorry there. Hello, everyone. We have Dr. Keri Perlson that's working or that's going to be speaking for us today. She's the Executive Director of Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, which is the research group at MIT focused on managerial governance and organizational issues of cybersecurity. Keri is widely considered an expert in the management and use of technology in organizations. She has held positions in academia as well as large and entrepreneurial companies during her career. Her resume includes roles as a faculty member at UT Austin and Babson College, as the CIO of a nonprofit, Shalom Austin, and as the research director for the Research Board, which is a Gartner company. She's also the author of Managing and Using Information Systems, a Strategic Approach, which is in its 20-year anniversary this year and is on its 7th edition. Keri, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Shay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Oh, now you're muted, Keri.
Okay. Can you hear me now? We good? Yeah. Okay. I need to somehow share my screen. I'm getting a can't do that. Okay, let me try again here. Okay, here we go. All right, so hopefully what you're seeing here is the MIT logo or the MIT dome. Everybody good? Okay, great. Thank you guys for having me. As Shay was mentioning, I've been looking at technology issues pretty much my whole career. I've been in Austin almost 30 years, and I started in my jobs, my life in Austin, I guess, as a professor at UT. So some of you may have even had my class or been in programs that I designed if you went to UT. But I've been around the IT space for many, many years, and most recently, I've taken this job at MIT, where I run the cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, we call it CAMS, research group. And we look at the business side of cybersecurity. We look at a lot of issues around the management, the leadership, the strategy. Through this whole COVID crisis, I started noticing that not only are we worried about individually how to keep our businesses safe, but a lot of the things we've been talking about around our business actually also applies to our families and our personal life. So when Shay approached me about participating in some of the events with Austin Women in Technology, I proposed this particular topic thinking that might be something that you guys are interested in. So this isn't going to be particularly technical, but we are going to talk about sort of the business side or the management side of cybersecurity and how to think about it so that you guys can feel that you're not getting caught up in some of the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt and the chaos that the bad guys are taking advantage of. So let me just start by saying that I don't have to tell you guys that cybersecurity is a big concern. I'm sure that you've seen so many articles about breaches and about records that have been stolen and companies that have been hacked that you're almost numb to it at this point. In fact, it doesn't even really make the big headlines anymore unless it's some big company that you haven't heard of or that you have heard of and some big breach that might have personally affected you. So about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, we saw Facebook being breached. And of course, that made the big news, the big headlines. And then more recently, we saw that this was back in October of last year, that Words with Friends, Zynga data was breached. About 200 million Words with Friends data was compromised and out there. So and more recently, actually, I think it was this week, Honda was found to have had a big breach, and 3 universities reported big breaches. So it's happening all the time, but it's almost so commonplace at this point, or so frequent, I wouldn't say common, but frequent, that it doesn't even make the big news anymore. So we like to say that well, first of all, when we look at companies, there are something like 200,000 security incidents that the average company handles in a day. That means that the bad guys are knocking on the door of these companies and through their networks, sometimes 200,000 times a day. Most of the time, the technology protects them. The technology recognizes that the firewalls or whatever the technology is that companies have in place keeps the bad guys out. But you can see from the statistics, something like 89% of companies say they've been a victim of a cyber attack in the last 12 months. And 1 in 3 say that they've been hacked more than 5 times in the past year. So that means that the bad guys are getting through. In our role at MIT, we like to say there are really only two types of organizations. There are those that know they've been hacked and those that don't yet know that they've been hacked. Pretty much everybody's been hacked. When I think about this in terms of our personal environment, I take the stance that our personal information is out there. Even though we think it's protected and we do everything we can to protect it, it's probably out there already. With all the hacks that have happened, with all the companies that we interact with, there are two types of people. Those that know their public information is out there, their private information is out there publicly, and those that haven't thought about the fact that their private information is out there publicly. So we'll talk about some things you can do about that. But the main point here is that in this world today, literally this month, last month, the month before, COVID-19 has created what I'm calling the perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos. We have people working from home that don't know how to really interface with their companies. We have people who are comfortable now with the basics of interfacing with their companies, but haven't really thought about it from a security perspective. We have all sorts of scams that are targeting us that in our focus to try to do our work from home, and with all the other pressures we have at home, which could be kids, could be spouses, could be roommates, could just be a home alone, that we're trying to get through this very chaotic and uncertain time. And so what we like to say at, one other slide here, I forgot I added this. You can see here that from the Federal Trade Commission's website, that there have been many complaints about cybersecurity issues and fraud. And this slide was pulled up May 28th, so about 10 days ago. You can see that 10 days ago, there were $42.98 million of loss due to fraud, mostly because of fake scamming kinds of things related to COVID-19 misinformation, if you will. So we like to say that the bad guys have upped their game, and now it's time for us to make sure that we've done the same thing. We're all working from home, we're keeping ourselves and our families and our organizations safe, and that's never been more urgent or more important now. The technologies will keep us safe to some extent, the firewalls, the spam collectors, all those things we don't really want to talk about because they're more technical than we want to get to. I'm saying that sort of sarcastically. We are a group of technology-based women, so we're not afraid of the technology, but the technologies are very dense and complex, and they're good. They help us. They do protect us. But we see statistics as high as 90% of breaches starting with some type of human error, where somebody clicks on an email or goes to a fake website or uploads a bad file or opens a bad file and downloads some sort of malware on our system. And because the current pandemic has created such a perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos, we've seen a major increase in cybercrime in the last 3 months. If you're interested in more statistics, I've put the link at the bottom here of where you can go read about cyber statistics for how things are playing out these days. So I want to spend the next few minutes talking about 5 different kinds of ways that the bad guys are taking advantage of our situation today. And the first one is about email scams. I'm sure you guys know by now that the Nigerian prince is not going to send you $1 million if you respond to their email. We know that's not going to happen. We've seen that in various alternate kinds of stories, but you just know that that's a phishing email and you don't click on it. You probably don't even see them anymore. Your filters on your laptops and in your email systems probably filter those out. But the bad guys know that people are not really paying close attention to the emails they get right now. There are all sorts of scams that look real. And here's one that I pulled off the internet from the World Health Organization, where it looks like this is an email from the WHO, and it has a button you can click on to find the latest safety measures. This happens to be a spam email. And if you click on it, malware is downloaded to your system and you're off to the races with the bad guys. We see similar emails from the CDC. We've seen emails from people looking for their U.S. Tax refunds, from the program designed for small businesses to get salary relief. All those kinds of situations set up the perfect storm for the bad guys to send us email scams. And we've also seen an increase. In fact, one of my girlfriends was just telling me yesterday, she actually got an email from what it looked like her boss, and it asked her to send $1,000 to him over to an email link, which was I think it was a PayPal page. And it asked it, and it was something he needed the $1,000 right away for a deal he was working on. And she didn't think to call him. It looked reasonable. And when she said, I can't get into the company accounts, he said, well, just use your personal account and I'll pay you back over email. And it turns out, of course, that was a scam. And she paid the $1,000. Then she called her boss and said, you know, the day later or so, and he said, what are you talking about? That wasn't from him. So we have to be really careful when an email asks us to do something, anything these days, that may seem out of the ordinary. So you want to make sure not only that you know who the email is from, but if it's asking you to do something that might involve money or might involve clicking on a file, that you call the company or you go around the email to the actual source and make sure that it's from a reasonable source. We've even seen emails where the return email looks right, but they use an I instead of an L or an L instead of an I. And in the font that they're using, they look the same. So you can't be too careful with making sure that you know who your emails are from. And certainly don't wire money or send any kind of valuable assets to anybody that you don't know for sure that you're sending them to. Second one is around information stealing and social engineering. This is a case where files, malware, are embedded in systems and files that look real. This particular picture from the Johns Hopkins University, the group that's following the COVID threats, actually is a fake version of it, and it has code embedded in it that weaponizes this particular map. And we see this happening often. Again, the chaos of the whole situation makes people look for information in many different places. And some of the websites that you go to are not actually the websites you think you're going to. So you want to make sure that when you look at files, when you open files, when you download files like this, that there's nothing in them that's going to compromise or load something on your laptop or your system. For example, this one steals the user's names and the passwords. Other malware could steal your bank accounts or your credit card numbers. And again, it's not just for you, but your families. Your families are operating and your friends operating in this same fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So you kind of want to educate them to be careful about what they're looking at so that they're not causing any kind of compromise, inadvertently trying to keep themselves safe and healthy. The third one is around ransomware and blackmail attacks. I think you guys probably know this, but ransomware is when a malicious actor tries to steals your data or locks up your computer or laptop and then holds you hostage for payment. NetWalker is a common file that is used to promote a ransomware attack. And in this particular case, this file, coronavirus_COVID-19.vbs, was attached to a system. Somebody clicked on it, the goal was to have you click on it because it looks like it might be an important file about the coronavirus, when in fact, it's actually putting code on your system that encrypts your files and then displays the note that you see on the screen here. And in this case, you're asked to follow instructions to get your files back. Depending on who sent the ransomware attack, paying may actually get you the key, but it may not get you the key. So ransomware is actually a big deal. If you're a victim of ransomware, even at home or in your office, what you want to do immediately is contact your IT people, your cybersecurity people, to see if they have a way to help you solve this. Or possibly you want to call the authorities, the FBI or Homeland Security. They may have a way for you to work through this. But ransomware isn't always as simple as paying the ransom to get your information back. So you want to be very careful about not clicking on files, even if they look like they might be reasonable, but they might be full of malware, like this one here, coronavirus_COVID-19.vbs. The fourth one I want to talk about is just work from home vulnerabilities. There are, many of us have heard about Zoom bombing, and maybe you've even experienced it early on in this coronavirus environment where everybody immediately went to work from home. We were hearing all sorts of articles about students in their classes on Zoom and some unauthorized person jumping into the call and creating havoc or saying things that were inappropriate, or maybe even doing things that were inappropriate in the classroom on Zoom meetings. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can with our Zoom meetings or any of these tools like Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams or WebEx. All of them have vulnerabilities. So you want to make sure you're as secure as possible when you send out the invitations. Use a password for those if you can. Some people recommend that you have the waiting room, a virtual waiting room, where you know that you let in the people that you want to let in. A meeting like this one, where we're not sharing anything really critically important, wouldn't matter so much to have a password, but some meetings where you're talking about board discussions, or whether maybe you're getting your family together to talk about health concerns or something along those lines, you'd want to make sure they were as secure as possible. Most people seem to collect information from emails. They're putting software in between that's scanning emails and pulling Zoom links and information out of those passwords. So you would want to make sure you didn't include a password with a link in the same email. But we're seeing many of these kinds of things happen in part while people are working from home, because most of us don't think about the fact that our routers in our home might have security issues. We expect our companies to keep us safe at our company, but at home, we don't have the same IT technology specialists there that would help us make sure that our routers and our Wi-Fi in our home is safe. So you want to do things like make sure that if you have two networks, that your kids perhaps are on one network and you're on the guest network. In my house, I have two networks. My daughter can be on one network, I can be on the other. And that way, if by chance she downloads something, or she's playing a game, or she accesses a site that puts some malware in the network, it won't jump right to my system. I'm in a different network. So using two networks in your home is one solution here. Also using networks that are that have the highest kinds of security on them, which again, if that's not your area of technology expertise, I would recommend asking around or asking your IT department. Many IT departments have been getting more savvy about giving advice for people working from home. And you want to make sure that your networks are secure at home. We're seeing companies using VPNs, but we're also seeing compromises to VPNs. So you want to make sure that you have the latest security from your company if you're using your company's VPN. And let me say that one of the key things for all of these vulnerabilities so far is to make sure that your system has all the patches in it that you could have. A lot of the times the malware that a bad guy propagates works because we haven't added the patches in that we've been sent by by the company. So for example, I know it's a pain when you get I know for me personally, every time there's a new update to the operating system on my laptop or to my iPhone, I really hesitate before I download it, because if I download it, I know things are going to look a little different, or they might act a little different, or it might delete my cookies and then I have to log into all my websites again. But those updates are designed to remove vulnerabilities. So the #1 way to be more secure at home is to make sure you keep your home systems, your iPhones, your Android phones, as up to date as possible, and that you do install all the updates that they share with you. But I want to talk about one more type of vulnerability that we're seeing really work, unfortunately, well in today's environment, and that's fake pharmacies and remedies, and it actually extends even beyond that. There have been thousands of websites set up in the last 3 months that look like they have something to do with the coronavirus, whether it's a tracking website for how many cases are in Austin, or whether it's a pharmacy that's got new personal protection equipment that you can buy, or many, many things. And of those thousands that have been set up, many of them, a number of them are fake. And they're not designed quite the same to breach you. They're not necessarily going to spread malware, although some of them are. Most of them are trying to get you to spend money on something that's fake. I know even in my case, even as up to date as I am on the latest scams, I fell for a scam looking for masks. And I thought if I saw some cute masks, I thought they were great. One of my girlfriends had actually recommended the site, so I thought she had gotten masks from that site, but it turns out she hadn't. And I went ahead and I bought some masks, and I never got them. And when I bought them back in March, early March, and here it is June, I hadn't got them. So about 2 weeks ago, I started investigating, and it turns out there were lots of complaints online. Lots of people, maybe some people got their masks, but most people didn't get their masks from this company. And in further investigation, they're either way, way behind in delivering their masks or they're fake. So I wrote them, and what I got back from them convinced me that they were a fake website. First, I got an email from their support person saying, we're sorry your masks haven't been there, but they're in transit, and here's the tracking code. And I went to look at the tracking code, which was a USPS tracking code, but I actually read the tracking, and it said that the code had been established, but the package was never sent to the post office. So I guess what they did is they were collecting people's money and setting up a tracking code so that they had one more level of scam going on here, and then they were never sending the package. And then I got a second email right after that telling me the same thing, but from a different person. So I'm pretty sure that company or those bad guys, if you will, were scamming me about for money for masks. But we're seeing this in fake test kits, fake sanitary supplies, masks, of course, other personal protective equipment, health insurance scams. We're seeing scams around things about your Social Security, getting Social Security checks for older people, perhaps mortgage scams. Of course, right now, as part of the whole COVID world, we're seeing great mortgage rates. And so that's another environment for the bad guys to come in and try to scam you into collecting your personal information. So we call these clickbaits. Hackers are trying to get you to click on something, and when you do, they either are downloading malware to your system or more likely trying to get money or information from you. So those are the 5 kinds of scams we're seeing. At MIT, we actually have a research project to look at how do we build a culture of cybersecurity in our organizations. And I wanted just to spend a quick minute on that, because this research not only will give you some ideas of what to do at home, but also in your office. This is designed for managers. The goal here is we're trying to drive cyber secure behaviors. We want people to not open files and not click on files that are bad, and not pick up a thumb drive you find on the ground and stick it in your computer to see if it's reasonable. There's certain behaviors we want to drive. We want people to report when they see a phishing email or a spear phishing email. And we believe that most organizations try to tell you what to do by giving you a training class. You take a training class when you first start, and then you're supposed to learn all the things to look for in a training class. And I don't know about you, but a training class lasts about an hour in my mind while I'm doing it. Usually I'm also doing my emails, because the training class is a compliance thing and I'm paying attention, but I'm also on my phone or doing something else. And I'm barely getting the key information out of it. And certainly a month later, it's gone, because I'm so busy trying to do my basic job, not remember all the things I've learned in all my training classes. But the training classes are the #1 ways companies try to tell us how to stay secure. And they are important. They're just not enough. Really what we want is we want people to have the right values, attitudes, and beliefs. We want to change the belief system and the attitudes both in our offices and in our homes, where people are thinking about security, and they're thinking when they see an email, wow, I believe that some people are, that there might be some bad emails here, and before I click on this or before I open this file, I'm going to check it. I'm going to check it first. That comes not just because you've been trained, but because you value making sure that you're operating in a secure environment. And so that's what I'm trying to do today. I'm trying to give you some reasons to change your values, attitudes, and beliefs so that cybersecurity is a little bit higher in your priority list. So when you see something, you do something about it, or you make sure that you don't click on the wrong kind of emails. And at our MIT research program, we've noticed that values, attitudes, and beliefs are influenced by external things like what you read about in the paper and what your neighbors are doing and what your company industry is doing. For example, financial services companies are way more secure in their industry than, say, consumer products companies. It's not that security is not important in consumer product companies. It's just that a bank that has been breached or is not trusted is much less likely to be a successful bank. And so the security is just raised in that particular industry. That's going to drive values, attitudes, and beliefs that are sort of outside what a manager can control. And then there are a bunch of managerial mechanisms, or in our case at home, parental or family mechanisms that drive cybersecurity or cybersecure behaviors, values, attitudes, and beliefs. And those are things like talking about it around the table, making it a priority in your life so that it seems to be a priority to you and other people pick up on it. Doing things like making sure you're aware of where the kind of breaches are that might happen. Doing things like updating patching your software all the time so that, that you send a message to the people around you that this is important and that it demonstrates your values, attitudes, and beliefs. Okay, so some things to look out for, just to summarize here. Some things to look out for might be things like calls, emails, or texts about government stimulus, COVID-19, or anything asking for any personal information. That should be a big red flag for you. Don't respond to those. If you get anything like that, you want to make sure you know who it's coming from and or go around what you got, the call, the email, or the text, and check it out another way to make sure that it's a valid person or organization that you're sending it to. Look out for online ads, for masks, for PPEs, personal protective equipment, test kits, vaccinations, medicines, anything really that, that we're seeking in COVID-19. Just make sure it's from a reputable source. Demands for payments. If your utility company or your phone company or your bank credit card, any of those are demanding payments right now, then you want to make sure that you check the source, call the company, talk to someone in person. Don't necessarily call the phone number on the email, but make sure that it's actually a valid demand for payment before you send any kind of money. And then calls or emails from coworkers. We want to make sure that that if we hear something from one of our companies, from somebody in our company, that we contact them separately. We don't just reply to their email and verify that. We want to make sure they're the right person, just so you don't get caught in the scam like my girlfriend did. Okay, so call to action. What are a few things that you can do now to help and protect your family and your organization? Number one, make sure your laptops, cell phones, and your apps are up to date. Install those updates. Most of those are designed to fix vulnerabilities. Two, protect your key assets. Personally, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I believe that my information is already out there. I know that on the dark web, people can buy, bad guys can buy credit cards, they can buy social security numbers, they can even buy credit cards down to the location of the person who owns the credit card. That information is out there. So what I do is I personally, I use dual authentication whenever I can. So on my bank, for example, or in some of my other systems, I have to enter a password and then another keyword, or I have to have it call me, some sort of dual authentication. And I also constantly monitor my bank statements and my credit cards account and my credit scores. And when I notice that there's a change, I immediately try to investigate that. I wouldn't say I'm obsessive about it. It's not like I do it every day, but I don't pay a credit card bill without really looking at all the charges to make sure they're right. I do, of course, check my bank account when I get deposits to make sure the deposit's there. I make sure that there's nothing unusual. At least once a month, you want to protect your key assets by, number one, changing your passwords as often as you can. Number two, dual authentication. And number three, just validating that there hasn't been a change. So there's this web link that I've put on this slide. It's Have I Been Pwned, PWNED.com. If you go to that website, you can type in your email and it will tell you all the places it might have been compromised. And I think you'll be kind of surprised. I know I was the first time I looked to see that any email I have has been compromised somewhere. So I now take the approach, I know my information's out there. I want to make sure there's no damage done to me or my family. So again, don't click on emails or websites that you don't know well. If you do, contact your IT support person immediately. Don't just shut down your computer, because sometimes shutting down your computer makes it worse. When you boot it back up, it's designed to launch something. So just reach out to your IT people as quickly as you can. Model the values, attitudes, and beliefs you want from those around you. So you want to make a hero out of the people who do things that protect your digital assets. Make it one of your priorities, and it'll become one of their priorities too. When I say make them a hero, you want to notice the good stuff. I kind of think that's an important management philosophy all the way around. Notice the good stuff and make heroes out of people that do the behaviors that you want to see happen. And that's in the same way within your family. You know, if one of your colleagues or one of your friends or one of your kids says something about cybersecurity, encourage that. Encourage them to investigate it. Or if they say they got this weird email, praise them. Don't come down on them because they clicked on an email. Praise them for having brought that to your attention so that you guys can deal with it. I think it's really important to make heroes out of people so that these things don't happen. Most of the bad stuff happens in the dark. They call it the dark web, the secret web, you know, the black web. It happens outside our view. So putting light on those things is really important. And I think modeling the values, attitudes, and beliefs that you want to see exhibited is one way to do that. And finally, share ideas with your family, friends, and coworkers. As I mentioned, bringing these issues out in the open and discussing it is super important. The bad guys thrive on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And of course, the world we're in today has all of those things. And then finally, keep aware of the latest breaches so you know if you are affected. You can find those by just doing a plain old Google search on latest breaches. And if you see a company you do a lot of business with, like Words with Friends, then you can pretty much assume that there might be a vulnerability that you are now privy to. And knowing that will help you. You might change your password, you might not use the application anymore, you might download patches, whatever is appropriate. But if you know what's happening, then you can actually take action against it or to protect yourself. Okay, that's all I got for us today. Oh, I was just going to tell you, this is my commercial slide, who we are. We look at the strategic governance, management, and organizational issues in cybersecurity. And we are funded by lots of companies who support our research. And if you're interested in this topic or any topic around the management of cybersecurity, I've put our website up there, cams.mit.edu, and I'd be happy to share information about who we are with you if that's of interest. Just reach out. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Keri. And hey, before people drop, I want to give people some time for some questions. So if you want to unmute, you can and ask a question, or you can chat it in here and I'll read it. But I'll give you guys a few minutes to chat some questions. I know, Keri, are you able to share these slides with us at the end?
I'd be happy to, yes.
Okay, great. We'll get that sent out to everyone as well. So get your questions chatted in there. If you want to chat them to everyone, I will read them. Or feel free to unmute yourself right now if you would like. And then also at the end, we'll do who's hiring, who's looking, and we'll talk about upcoming events. So
a question on antivirus.
Yes.
Is there any big worthwhile difference between the paid solutions that you can get for antivirus versus like the regular ones you get inherent to Windows?
I'm not a technology expert on antivirus, so I can't tell you exactly, but I believe that I use Malwarebytes, and that's the one that I use that keeps track of my systems. What you want to do with antivirus primarily is make sure that it's updated regularly. So I can't really comment on what comes with Windows, but I believe that most of those systems are designed at the very basic level. I don't want to speak badly about any particular vendor because I'm not aware of it. I don't know. But personally, I think the main issue with antivirus is to make sure that the libraries are updated regularly so that you can have the latest signatures of the malware that's out there so that it can be noticed. So I don't know with the one you're talking with Microsoft, if that is updated, how regularly it's updated. I'm sure you could do a quick Google search and find out.
Yes.
But for me personally, I use Malwarebytes because What I like about it is it's automatically in the background, always running, and it's always updating itself. And I believe most of them work that way.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and Keri, we can also post that in our Slack as well. And I know Dom just put that in there to get Jody's question answered if anyone does happen to be an expert on that. Good question, Jody.
Can somebody share with me an example maybe of where you have encountered one of these kind of fake scams? Maybe we could just get some discussion going about that too. If you have an example of, you saw an email or somebody you know saw an email or you clicked on a site, I'd love to hear more stories from people.
I'll share one. We were recently looking for an apartment for a temporary sublet, and we came across one where the post was quite professional. The guy was sharing his work details. He even made a mock, I think it was like Rand or something, a big well-known company, and he had mocked their webpage so it looked exactly like the real webpage. So he put in a lot of effort, like you mentioned, that they're mocking websites. Put in a lot of effort, and my husband, like, it wasn't anything that was a huge red flag, but he was just, like you said, kind of always aware of things, and there were enough little clues. He was like, this seems strange. And so I think one of the biggest ones is that he didn't want to meet us there. He wanted, like, he didn't want to show us the apartment first, was the biggest one. But outside of that, it was really hard to tell that this was a scam. And like Craigslist is full of things like this. So you have to be really careful with that specifically.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's actually a really good example. And I'm sorry you encountered that when looking for a sublet. I hope you found a good place. But I've noticed also on Craigslist, I have to agree with you, any place where people can post things that go relatively unchecked. It could be a dating website. I'm sure those of you that have dated online, I know I have seen, call it catfishing, people that aren't who they say they are. There are people that embellish their ad, whether it's a personal ad or a place to rent. But there are also people that aren't even who they say they are. And it takes a long time to figure out that they aren't who they say they are, because they play who they say they are for a very long time. And recently, I actually encountered something on Craigslist. I'd like to get a puppy. And I was looking online and I saw a cute ad on Craigslist. And I clicked on it and I read it. And then I was looking for another puppy. I was looking at other ads and I saw another ad for a completely different kind of puppy with a completely different email, but it was the exact same word for word ad. I have two pets, Tom and Lucy. Lucy's the wild one, Tom's the calm one. And if I hadn't seen the second one, I would have thought the first one was legitimate. But when I saw two ads worded exactly the same way about different breeds of dogs, that was a clue. That was a slap in the face, actually, that these are not real. So I do think you have to be extra careful when you're looking online. That's a good example that you brought up, and thank you for sharing that. So Marissa, I see you have a question about the website, Have I Been Pawned, and that you just checked it out and that you see that you have been pawned. And that I think everybody's going to find that their emails are out there, that they've been pawned. So the three recommendations I have, one is change your email password. For me personally, keeping track of passwords is a real pain. And so I use a password vault. I happen to use 1Password. There's many of them, but you should, I can't keep track of all my passwords. When you pick a password, you want to pick a passphrase rather than just a word. If you think about how passwords are broken, there are two ways. Usually way one, it does not happen. That's what you see on television. Somebody sits down and says, well, let me see, what is Shay's boyfriend's name? What's Shay's kid's name? What's Shay's city? And they try to type all those in, and lo and behold, they come up with your password. That's not usually the way the bad guys do it. The way the bad guys do it is they either intercept your password somewhere, or they use a system that checks every letter and every number, and it just runs through all the combinations, and eventually it hits on one. And so if you think of that particular approach to breaking passwords, then if you have a longer password, then it's harder to break than a shorter password. But the computer doesn't care if your long password is AX2596 exclamation point, or it's Heather 2020 Austin. The computer doesn't know the difference, that it's running through all of the combinations and it just comes up with the combination. So it's better to pick 3 or 4 words and string them together in your password, and maybe include you know, an exclamation point or a pound sign if you can, than it is to try to make something that you'll never remember. So use a passphrase. It could be, you know, I like Austin in the summer. That's a long passphrase. It's going to take a computer a lot longer to break that code than Austin. So that's what I would recommend. I'd recommend changing your password. I recommend dual authentication if you can, and I recommend updating your systems so that you have the latest patches on them.
And I would like to add, you can also use like a password vault, using longer passwords with some odd symbols in it. It's also make it harder. So.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Stella. And I said I use 1Password. Which one do you use? What vault do you use?
I use Keeper.
Great, great. Yeah, there are many different vaults, and again, it's useful to use for me because I use a different password on every website. So if 1Password's compromised, then it wouldn't be compromised on all my sites. And in particular, my bank accounts, I make sure that, because that's that's my crown jewel, right? My bank account, I make sure that that's up to date. And I also change that password pretty regularly. And I don't use the passwords I use on my bank accounts anywhere else. So they wouldn't, if they were compromised elsewhere, they wouldn't be able to get into my bank accounts. But a password vault is really useful. And there are many different ones you could use, but it doesn't really matter what you use for the password, it's how long the password is. So you can put in exclamation points and pound signs. I do that. I think it makes me feel a little better, like it's a more difficult password to break. But the truth is that the way they're breaking them is not, it doesn't matter. They're going through every character on the keyboard automatically. They're not doing it. Their bots are doing it. And so the length is the key here. So thank you for sharing that, Stella. Appreciate that.
I see we have Lauren said, yeah, online dating websites are loaded with people who are looking for cyber information. Anything else you wanted to elaborate on that, Keri?
Well, I mean, I'm divorced also, and only a year and a half divorced. So I thought getting online to online dating was what I had to do for this round of trying to, you know, meet men. I'm not so convinced anymore. I've actually seen at least a dozen catfish, people who look like they are who they say they are, and then I find out later they're not. I've had one con man, a convicted con man. When I finally got his full name and I did a Google search on him, there was an article about him in the Boston Globe and how he had scammed people out of $80,000 a few years ago. So I have to agree with that comment that there are a lot of bad guys on dating websites. I hope there's some not bad guys, because there's some not bad girls like us.
Yeah.
But I haven't had good luck. So I just have to agree 100% with that. But I do think that, you know, you don't want to share too much personal information with anybody that you don't know. And it's really hard in this world right now where we can't meet people face to face and get to know them. But even when you meet people face to face and get to know them, it's not till you really know them. Like, as I said, one guy really is a con man. Turns out that we had on LinkedIn, we had one person in common, and I knew that person pretty well. And I called him and I'm like, do you know this guy? And he's like, oh my God, how did you find him? Stay away from him. So I had a personal way to validate that. But I do think you just have to be careful on websites, on Craigslist. You know, I mean, you wouldn't go to a bar and start giving out your bank account to someone at a bar. Why would you do it anywhere else? You know, or give even your bank name, you know, why? You just have to be really careful. I think that the catfishing on the dating sites, from what I've seen, the end game for most of those people is money. They're going to eventually hit you up for money. I haven't gotten to that point with any of them yet, but fortunately for me. But I think that, you know, obviously you don't want to give money to anybody, even no matter how much you think you know them from an online site, because there's depth there. They take a lot of time to make themselves look real.
I'll say that did happen to me. My cousin is in the Army, and someone direct messaged me on Instagram, and I must have posted something about my cousin being in the military, and he was like, hey, I'm overseas with your cousin. You know, we're trying to get back to the States from this deployment. I know he's dying to get there. Will you send me some money so I can help send him home because his wife is pregnant? And luckily I did not do it because I called his wife and I was like, yeah, one of Charlie's, platoon mates like reached out to me, and she was like, that is not a real person. And so I'm so grateful, but I agree. They tugged on my heartstrings. And I'm private. They direct messaged me on Instagram and all this stuff. So I agree.
And we call that spear phishing. They learn something about you and then they use that to try to get to you. So, and that happens more than you think it does. So you're exactly right, Heather. I'm so glad that you brought that example up. People that even look like people that you would know, as you said, tugged on your heartstrings, hit on things that you knew were sort of true. I mean, that's how the con works. They know enough that's sort of true that they can grab onto those. So good job for recognizing that and going around and calling his wife. Good job for that.
Well, and I see Dom asked a question that I also want to relate to. She says, are there a couple of simple indicators to look for on e-commerce and retail sites that tell they're legit? Obviously, Instagram is doing a lot of ads for cute clothing that we just easily click on. Is there a way we can tell to verify if it's a real company?
That's a really good question. I mean, we all live in this digital world. Nobody wants to pick up the phone and call anymore. I think the best way to protect yourself from those kinds of things is to do a search outside of their website on their website and see if you can come up with anybody who's found out that they are a scam. I mean, the bad guys, we like to say the good guys are good, but the bad guys are getting badder faster. So they are aware of what we're doing and how we're trying to protect ourselves, and they're finding ways around it. So if you see an e-commerce or a retail site that looks like it has something you like, I mean, like I said with the masks, I didn't do the search. I went on a girlfriend's recommendation, and it's not that I don't trust her. She's actually very trustworthy, but I just thought it looked cute, and what's $30? I'll try $30 to see if I can get these cute masks. But I should have done a search, because when I told her that I never got the mask, she's like, oh, I did a search and I saw these people complaining about how they never got anything. And I just decided it was a scam. So I think if you're not going to actually pick up the phone and call the company, which many times you can't, do a search and see what other people are saying about it. And if you see red flags, no matter how cute the masks are, don't get them.
That's a good point. What about, there's another question. What do you think about level of security of Google Chrome password saving? Which is a great question.
Yeah, so I don't know very much specifically about the particular technologies like Google Chrome's password saving. I actually do let Google Chrome keep some of my passwords. I never let any of these sites keep my bank passwords. I keep those separate. But I do let Google Chrome, and when it says, should I save your password, I do let it do that sometimes, particularly if it's a site that I'm not doing any transacting that is really of any deep nature. I should say that for my credit cards, I have several, but I only use 2 of them. One of them is I use almost all the time, and that's my American Express, because they send me alerts when something weird happens with like if there's a charge that they didn't recognize, I get an alert. And that's one way that I keep track of how my credit cards are used. And so I only use that one when I'm online, because if somebody else is scamming that credit card, and let me tell you, I'm on my 11th American Express card. I've had to have them send me new ones 10 times over the past few years. So I mean, that happens, but for me, that's how I manage it. I buy the stuff I want. I use that credit card. And if I see weird things, I call American Express right away. They cancel that card and send me a new one. And that's how I manage it.
Okay. What about device biometrics passwords?
Yeah, so that's sort of the latest technology, device biometrics. I actually have a new MacBook Pro. I'm talking to you on it, and it has a fingerprint thing. So I can actually log in with my fingerprint on the button. And there are other ones that are starting to use eyes. I know, like your iPhone does your facial recognition. I think those are really, right now, they're better. But as I said, the good guys are good and the bad guys are getting badder faster. I'm sure there will be ways to compromise those. You see it on the movies all the time. That's how they get into those secret rooms in the mystery movies or the James Bond movies or whatever. It doesn't quite work like that. But they're good, and they're the best things we have right now. So I would say yes, but I would say yes, but they're good right now. And we'll see what happens, 2 or 3 or 5 years from now.
Yeah. Jody, one, thank you for the volunteer to make the masks. You're amazing. But she asked, what about phone application payments versus credit cards and like PayPal, Google Pay, things like that?
Well, again, all of these have security built in, and it's just a matter of how good the company is that manages the use of those. So when you use PayPal, it's as secure as it can possibly be. Again, change your password regularly so nobody can get into your account. It's a bank. Think of it like a bank. But also, I'm sure there are people hacking into those too. I don't know of any recent breaches of like PayPal or Google Pay or any of those, but the bad guys go where the money is. They're after money.
Right.
And some of these bad guys live in countries where it doesn't take a whole lot of money for them to live like kings. So if they send out a spear phishing and they get even 0.1% of the people clicking on it and sending them $50, that's a success for them, and they're going to do it again. So, for every success they have, the more success they, the more they try to do more of that. So I would say for phone apps and payments, again, use your credit card if you can, and or monitor your bank accounts and your credit cards and make sure you don't see weird charges. That's what I do. And the other thing I do is I have an insurance policy. I use LifeLock, but there are other ones that you can buy that will help you if your identity is stolen, or will cover losses other than your credit card covers some losses. So if your American Express or your Visa is used inappropriately and you report it, I think there's a $50 limit that you have to pay, but most of them don't even charge you the $50. They just cover it. So you've got some insurance built in there. So the way the way I think about it is I have that insurance, and then I have LifeLock, which is another level, which locks my credit, but it also gives me some insurance if something is damaged, if there are damages. So you want to protect your asset. You want to make sure that you have your technology as up to date as possible. And then you also want to have some way to mitigate the loss, transfer the risk. And that's where insurance comes in.
Yeah. And I know Lauren McNamara brought up here, fingerprinting, scanning technology was debunked as a working security feature a while back. And I think all of it is getting better. And I think COVID is